that we get hooked, you know, that we get snookered, that we get caught by our hearts to clean up other people's messes. Now, there are people making messes all the time in my country, not in Canada, I'm sure that, but at least in my country, I'll take it. And the climate change issue is a classical example, right? I mean, we have a Senate that's already been sold to the energy companies and so on, and they're making up messes daily. We're experiencing them this week. Does that mean that Quakers in our hearts, touched deeply by the amount of suffering that's already been happening and will happen increasingly, will get into the adaptation business? You know, will we bring a kind of social work impulse to this and try to alleviate the suffering for climate refugees who no longer have an island to live on in the Pacific? Take them into our houses, perhaps? Adopt children of parents who've gone under the waves or something? Will that be our response? And it's not that that would be bad. I mean, I've got a big heart. But it would be very odd in a way, because the way we try to live our lives, our personal lives, is with an ethic of responsibility. So how about if we were to say to the people who are making this gigantic mess, these 190 plus national leaders who got together in Copenhagen and were pathetic. How about if we, the people of the world, including Quakers, say, clean up your mess now? And think of the self-empowerment that would be involved with that. Early Quakers often used capital P power to refer to the Spirit. Because the Spirit of God, as I've experienced the Spirit anyway, is a spirit of empowerment. It's not the spirit of bending over. It's not the spirit of placating and being docile and saying, oh, okay, you made a mess, I'll clean it up. It's not about that at all. It's about standing on our hind legs and demanding, as George Fox did, as the Bang at 60 did, as the early Friends did, over and over, that people take responsibility and live up to God's truth. As I described in this Michener lecture, going to the trouble of crossing the Atlantic Ocean in barely seaworthy boats to invade the Puritan theocracy of Massachusetts, right? Calling on the leadership of that theocracy to get right with God. I don't think they used exactly that phrase, but I was brought up an evangelical, so that phrase works for me. But anyway, you know, to come into a proper relationship, a right relationship with God, rather than having a dictatorship, which is what they really were running in Massachusetts. So that kind of Quaker legacy is, it seems, I mean, I can understand we can go through periods of time when we forget what we know, but then there are times when we can wake up and remember what we know already and say, oh, we already know how to deal with this. We already know that nonviolent struggle, as practiced by early Friends, as practiced by Lucretia Mott, as practiced by a whole series of Quakers through the ages, is, just as the New Zealand Quakers remembered at a particular moment, is just what's needed right here. We've got the DNA, we've got the skill set, or we can acquire the skill set, and let's just go for it. Let's just do it. And it puts us not in some kind of weird bubble. I know that sometimes the Quaker activist self-image can be one of the righteous few who are over here witnessing to the truth. When I was working for Britain Yearly Meeting out of London, out of Friends House, London, I ran into a Quaker who said, well, you know what we mean by Quaker witness, don't you? And I said, no, what do you mean? And he said, well, Quaker witness is when you stand up to be counted, and then you sit down so you don't rock the boat. But that's not what those New Zealand friends were doing. That's certainly not what early friends in Britain were doing. They were not about to sit down and not rock the boat. They were going to rock the boat until the course was changed. I could do so many nautical analogies here. You all could. Right? Raining, there's water in the air. One of my favorite stories of the crossing of the Atlantic was when the boat captain on a Quaker vessel died, and they didn't have a captain. And the Quakers were just, good Quakers coming to the New World, and they didn't have nautical skills. But there they were on the open sea, so they had meeting for worship every day on the deck. And the Spirit told them to steer a little that way. Steer a little that way, and now we got to steer a little that way. So every day they had meetings to find out where they were being landed. And they didn't end up in Spain. They actually got across the Atlantic and not very far away from their destination. The Spirit wants to lead us. I'm sure of that. It's our getting in alignment with it, and getting in alignment with it in the sense of both humility and also the proper appreciation for our own power. I'm not saying Quakers can do everything ourselves, but in cooperation with, in league with others. The first mass organization in the United States to come out against the war in Iraq and for bringing the troops home was the American Federation of Labor. I haven't met another Quaker yet who knew that. We do suffer from our isolation, from our being in a bubble. Sometimes a bubble defined by middle class, sometimes a bubble defined by race, sometimes whatever. Not everybody in the world listens to NPR. I do, some of you do, but there is this larger world that we could join. And if climate change won't get us interested in joining others and using people power to set things right so our future generations can have a good chance, I don't know what would. So that's intended to provoke you a little bit, challenge maybe. So I guess this is the opportunity, Lucy, for people to push back, challenge right back. I admitted on Monday night I like conflict, so just have at me. And I so appreciate the friends who all week long have been saying, George! So I've had a marvelous week. Yes?
During your plenary lecture, you talked about the President Obama is just there believing that everything should be better, but he needs us to push him. I don't buy a bit of that. I think President Obama has shown he's not interested in changing things by putting Geithner et al. In charge of the money supply and not doing the things he said he was going to do. Guantanamo is still open. Don't ask, don't tell is still in place. The health insurance bill is a mess and worthless. The financial reform is nothing. Where's the juice here? Where's the beef? If this guy is the President of the United States, there's no evidence that he's like Roosevelt, hoping we'll come and tell him. There's no message coming from him that says, oh, make me do it, help me do it. I'm not seeing any upside here. And I'm really angry about it because I thought there was going to be change, and I supported him to get elected.
Were y'all able to hear that? Basically, disappointment with Obama, didn't live up to our expectations, and very, very disappointed about that. There's certainly days when that's where I am as well. And at the same time, my picture of the power structure of the United States doesn't actually give that big a role to the president. I was lucky enough to know an AFSC staffer named Cecil Thomas in the late 50s, early 60s, whose job with the Service Committee was trying to change U.S. policy vis-a-vis China. Because you remember in those days it was the bad old communist China, and then there was the good little gallant Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan with the remnants of his army, and the U.S. was foursquare behind Chiang Kai-shek, the real China, and then there was this horrible, horrible demonic China. And so the Service Committee, of course, thought this is a really terrible foreign policy, and it needs to be changed. So Cecil Thomas's job was to do that. And somebody led him to David Rockefeller, who was at that time president of Chase Manhattan Bank, and one of the Rockefeller accounts or something, right? And Rockefeller realized that Cecil Thomas could be very useful, because Rockefeller himself had decided that China was a massive market waiting to be ready to be had. And not only in terms of market, but also in terms of raw materials and resources and so on and so on. And in terms of labor power, awesome. So David Rockefeller wanted a change in China policy as well. This is how he got it. He had Cecil Thomas. Cecil would tell me these stories. They were amazing stories for me as a youngin'. That he would be, Rockefeller would only have a few minutes and he had to shave, so there would be Cecil Thomas watching him shave while he was getting, and I want you to see so-and-so in Chicago, and then you need to run to LA because you need to see so-and-so and so-and-so. And next thing you know, Cecil Thomas was running all over the country, networking for David Rockefeller and his friends, networking with top CEOs and incredibly rich people. So Cecil Thomas, who was just a middle-class person, suddenly just found himself all kinds of access to mansions and very, very high, offices very high, on very top floors, right? So he's having, in a way, a time of his life, because it looks like, whoa, maybe we're going to get this change in China policy. It was only, and I was excited too, it was only later that I really figured out the implications of this. Because once Cecil had done enough of this lining up, so there was a consensus change among the richest Americans, basically, Nixon was told, we're changing policy vis-a-vis China. Now Nixon, you may remember, even though a Quaker, had made his political career as an anti-communist. Fervent anti-communist. That was his bread and butter. So there was an interest group based in the middle class, based in your local jewelry store owner, your local pharmacy owner, and so on, when America had those people before Walmart drove everybody out, right? There used to be that. And it was called the Committee of 1 Million. And it was this, yay, Chiang Kai-shek, we love Taiwan. Formosa, they call it. Anyway, it looked like Nixon was completely in Chiang Kai-shek's camp, right? However, David Rockefeller and Cecil Thomas, then the word passed to Nixon, and Nixon announces to this country, we love Communist China. So the assumption behind our anger with Obama, I believe, underneath a couple of layers, is an assumption that this is a democracy. And that we can democratically elect a president, and that gives that president enormous power to do the following things. I don't believe it's true. I believe who actually runs the country is today's friends of the David Rockefeller. They're the ones who can turn an awesomely anti-communist lifetime politician into a communist lover when they tell him it's time to do that. And Nixon really had no choice. So Obama, I believe, is operating in those constraints. I see him as actually behind a castle wall. And we're outside the castle wall, but I know who's inside. And he, though, because he cares about us, I believe, writes messages every once in a while on a piece of paper, crumples it up, and throws it over the top of the castle wall. And then one of us, finds this crumpled piece of paper and carefully unfolds it, and it says, for example, this is true, I believe in single-payer universal health care. That's what would really work for America. Oh. That's not what he proposes to Congress, because he's inside the wall. But that's what he believes.